As most of you know, a terrorist threat was made by the perpetrators of the infamous Sony hacks, claiming they would carry out a 9/11 type of attack on any theaters choosing to show the new Seth Rogen comedy, The Interview. Within the threat, warnings were issued that anyone living near a theater showing the film should evacuate. This cowardly act set off a chain of events resulting in all major movie theater chains, including AMC, to pull The Interview from their schedules, as well as Sony Pictures ultimately canceling the release of their film. Now, it should be said here at the outset that while I do in fact work for AMC Theaters, all the following comments and opinions are my own and do not in any way necessarily reflect the position or opinions of AMC Theaters. AMC does not know the content of my address this morning, nor have they attempted to give me any sort of direction. The following thoughts are exclusively my own. The question that many people are dealing with now is, was it the right decision? Was it the wrong decision? As with seemingly all things online, people are reacting with great passion, either in terms of support for pulling the film or in terms of disgust with accusations of cowardice and appeasement. Yesterday morning, just a few minutes before AMC Movie Talk was to go live, a spirited discussion broke out amongst the crew about this very topic. Now, at the time, only Cinemark had announced that they were dropping The Interview from their theaters, and so we debated if it was the right thing for them to do. One of our crew expressed great disappointment in their decision, feeling it was a form of giving in to terrorism and that Cinemark should have stood their ground and shown the film. It was a belief that many people online share today. However, I disagree. You see, in this country, there is a body, the government, responsible for the prevention of these sorts of threats, responsible for weeding out those who would plan or threaten to do harm to the men, women, and children who live here, and responsible for hunting down and punishing those who carry out such plans and threats. I think all of us would agree such responsibilities don't fall to Sony Pictures or Cinemark Theaters or AMC Theaters for that matter. So the question arises, in the event of such a threat being made, and the authorities are yet to stop or apprehend those responsible, what is the responsibility of bodies like Sony Pictures, of Cinemark, of Regal, and yes, of AMC Theaters? Let's look back to July 20th of 2012 in Aurora, Colorado, when a gunman entered a Cinemark movie theater and killed 12 people, injuring 70 others. There was no warning given to Cinemark that a lunatic was heading to their establishment with a weapon, and it is my personal opinion Cinemark was clearly not to blame for the act of one evil person, nor should they be held responsible. However, regardless of that, Cinemark has found themselves fighting a lawsuit for years by those wishing to attach blame and accountability on them for the horrible acts of one other person. Following those horrible events in Aurora, Colorado, all significant movie theater chains either reworked or reasserted their policies with a major emphasis on the primary concern being for that of the patron. Yes, for their comfort and enjoyment, but most importantly for their safety. Safety of the guests and employees of these establishments were confirmed as the #1 priority, with no other consideration coming close. Granted, there is only so much a movie theater can do to ensure the safety of their guests, but what can be done should be done with all reasonable measures. And if the safety of your guests and employees is truly your #1 concern, then if a building inspector tells you there may be a small chance that the ceiling of your theater may collapse, then it is the responsibility of that theater to not allow guests into the potentially dangerous situation until the issue has been resolved. If a fire alarm is pulled, it is your responsibility to evacuate the guests of the building, even if there's only a small chance that the alarm may be legitimate. Because safety is, after all, your #1 concern. It is not their right to keep people out of harm's way in their buildings, it is their responsibility. Think back again to the terrible events at the Cinemark in Aurora, Colorado, a situation where Cinemark had no warning of the coming tragedy, nor had any reasonable way of preventing it. Now imagine with me a terrible situation where, God forbid, Sony Pictures did not pull the release of The Interview, and movie houses like AMC, Cinemark, and Regal did not remove the movie from their theaters, and some act of terror did occur that resulted in the loss of lives. Think about that for a minute. What would the narrative on the social media be? With great conviction and absolute certainty, I'll tell you what the narrative would be. People would cry out that the evil and greedy corporations put a higher value on making an extra dollar from Sony's movie than the lives of the people who came to their theaters. There would be a great demand that Sony and movie theaters be held responsible for the lives lost because, unlike Aurora, Colorado, there was warning. There was a reasonable expectation that something tragic could happen. And yet, in the interest of making money, they turned a blind eye and carried on business as usual with little to no care about the lives of the guests and employees in the building. Safety be damned. This is what people would say, and they would be right to do so. That being said, it's more than understandable that we all collectively feel a sense of anger, frustration, and disgust when something as basic as our way of life, as going to the movies, is being disrupted by cowards behind a keyboard somewhere. But it's also important that we direct that anger, that frustration, that disgust to the individuals who deserve it, and not to the bodies that bear the heavy responsibility of their guests' safety. So our job is to help the authorities do their job in stopping and punishing the cowardly by making sure the safety of our public, our guests, and our employees is our #1 concern. It's a collective effort. It's a team effort. It is the rational, reasonable, responsible, and overall right thing to do. To suggest otherwise, in my personal opinion, is just self-important grandstanding. To do nothing not only puts the theater in danger, it puts the employees of that theater in danger. It puts the guests going to see the interview in Theater 4 in danger, and it puts the mom taking her 2 little girls to see the Penguins of Madagascar in Theater 3 in danger as well. So let me end this with a sports analogy because, after all, what is a John Campea rant without a sports analogy? Sometime in a football game, your team may face a 4th and 20. Oh sure, the grandstanding fans bellowing out a lot of hot air in the bleachers may be screaming at the coach to have some balls and go for it, but the intelligent football fan knows that it's time to punt. The intelligent fan also knows that punting the ball away is not a concession of defeat. On the contrary, it is a strategic repositioning to put your team in a better position to ensure victory later in the game. Yes, today we had to punt, and that feeling sucks. But by doing so, we better ensure the safety of the guests, we allow the authorities to do their job without a horrific human tragedy to also contend with, and we move a little bit closer to getting the win a bit later in the game. Or we could be the idiot who goes for it on 4th and 20, fumble the ball on our own goal line, and instead of just losing the game for our team, everyone in the stadium dies. It's not that difficult of a choice. Anyway, those are just my thoughts and opinions on this situation. I'm sure you have your own, and I look forward to reading them in the days ahead. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Now let's get going on AMC Movie Talk.
Hey everyone, welcome to AMC Movie Talk for movie fans. I'm your host, Ashley Mova, and this is the daily show where we give you all of the latest news from the world of movies, plus a little bit of insight into what it all means. Leading off the show today is AMC Movie News production manager, Dennis Zen.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another brand new episode of AMC Movie Talk. I'm here taking over the guest seat for John today because he's got a bout of the food poisoning. We're doing an all Twitter questions today. This is my first time back since our awesome celebration.
Oh, cool.
You were on here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday?
Yeah, I was on Monday, and hello everyone.
Yeah.
And Monday was pretty. I mean, the party was actually great. Meeting all the fans was incredible.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun at the party chatting with her. The only thing was I actually didn't get to see you guys a lot.
I know,
Yeah.
it was because it was like the sea of people. Hello, by the way, I'm Christian Harlow.
Everyone knows who you are.
Oh, that's nice. It was weird because you would go, not weird, great. You would go into this like sea of people, and then you'd be like, hey, oh, there's Dennis talking to another sea of people. It was very humbling to see how much this show touches people.
Yeah, I had a great time, and I enjoyed chatting with everyone. All right, Ashley, what do we got on the Twitter stream?
First question for today comes from Mick Flynn, and he says, which is more likely to happen first? Daniel Day-Lewis wins a 4th Oscar, or Leonardo DiCaprio wins his first?
Daniel Day-Lewis winning his 4th.
Yeah.
Yeah. It has nothing against DiCaprio.
It's tough, though, because Daniel Day-Lewis doesn't really make that many movies.
But every time he does, he gets nominated and wins. That's the thing. Yeah, he spaces out. And Campea said this a bunch of times too, and I agree with him, is that it's not that DiCaprio is hated by the Academy as much as it's just every time he goes into his nominations, there's always someone else that was just a little bit better. Mm-hmm. Wolf of Wall Street's one of my favorite movies of all time, not just Love last year. And he was going up some heavy competition. But Daniel Day-Lewis he's just that one actor. He becomes, like, you never see Daniel Day-Lewis. With DiCaprio, as great as he is, he's still, oh, it's DiCaprio. Even though he became Jordan Belfort, he's still aware that he was DiCaprio. Daniel Day-Lewis transforms himself every single time.
Well, not only did DiCaprio go up against heavy competition, he was taking on a role that was very controversial. That if he had been actually won, there would have been a lot of backlash.
Yeah, I don't think that plays into it as much as it's when you weigh out because everyone still says it's one of his best performances of all time, and I think that I don't know if the controversy always plays into it. Sometimes it does, but in that particular role, because I think the Academy voters, if we're talking about The Wolf of Wall Street, should be intelligent enough to know that movie was not glorifying Jordan Belfort. It was showing how despicable he was, and it was a satire on the whole thing, and it was the rise and then the crash, and I think that voters knew that.
Okay, well, I'm gonna bet on DiCaprio.
Okay.
Yeah, even though he hasn't won yet, I'm gonna go that way, and you're gonna go with
Daniel Day-Lewis. I hope DiCaprio. I mean, it would be nice. I mean, I hope Daniel Day-Lewis says, you know what, you can have one of mine, just because I'm one of the ones that he has.
All right, what's next?
Akuna Frittata writes, what do you think the relationship between Joker and the rest of the Suicide Squad will be?
I don't think Joker's going to be in it as much as you think. I think Joker's going to have his majority of the relationship will be with Harley Quinn, I think, and it's just to set it up going, oh, that's the new telling of the Joker. You only need him for 1 or 2 scenes. You don't need him to take over. You really have to focus on the Suicide Squad. You have to, because we know the Joker. The Joker is a character that we're familiar with. You know he's going to show up in the standalone Batman movie. He'd probably show up in the Justice League movie. You need him to just show up and go, oh, that's the new telling of it, but let's focus on these guys we don't know a lot about yet.
Yeah, I don't think he'll be part of the Suicide Squad because it doesn't make any sense, right? The government controlled, like, hey, you can't control Joker. You can't be telling him, oh, you got to do this. It would be silly. So I don't think he will be as well. I think he's just going to show up here.
Set him up, get him excited. Same way they're going to do in Batman v Superman, to where there'll be parts of Wonder Woman and Aquaman, and you'll set them up going, oh, that's the new telling of it. Great, can't wait to see them again. Jared Leto's a great actor. Set me up, get me excited to show me his interpretation of what the Joker's going to be, and then I'll want to see him more and more and more.
Yeah. Oh, all right. What's next?
Denizkin S. writes, what happens if Suicide Squad is a big hit? Will WB add a sequel to their current slate, or do we have to wait?
I'd say that we'd have to wait.
I'd say I think it's smart to wait. I think that the way that they're planning it out is they probably have chunks of time. They probably pay attention to that. Going, if this hits, if they really respond, this will be the chunk of time that we can get the sequel in there if we need it to be. But let's focus on the narrative right now. This is where we need it to go. This is where the characters will pop up. This is where we can throw Harley Quinn in and Deadshot can pop in on this movie. Let's set them up. And if it is really popular, like we hope, then the audience will really respond when we start throwing them in the other movies in our cinematic universe.
I mean, it definitely has the potential of being a hit, but it's not going to be Batman v Superman big, you know, or Justice League big.
Correct, and because not only are Batman and Superman, we're so familiar with them, and it's Batman and Superman. Let's watch them in a movie. That's impossible to try to get those kind of numbers, and that's not what they're shooting for. They're shooting to get a good movie, get the fans excited to show this is the type of stuff we're dealing with in this brand new universe. This is the directors, these are the writers, these are the actors. Get excited. That's hopefully what we say after we see Suicide Squad.
Plus, I think with their plan laid out already, like trying to fit another movie into there would just
tough. You're jamming it. You're jamming it, and then you're just looking like, oh yeah, that made money. More. Don't do that. You don't need to do that, and I don't think they're gonna do that.
And story-wise, they should already have a plan of what the universe is, where it's going. So throwing that in there might, ruin things.
It'll throw it off just because it's popular to say, well, wait a minute, that was really good, and they really liked it. So why don't we just push Aquaman to the side for now, and then don't do that. That's studio head stuff. Stick to the narrative. You have a narrative, you've planned out your narrative, and I think that they will. I hope they will.
All right, what's next?
Lucas C. Novo writes, when will we see a new Three Musketeers movie?
Never?
I hope not for a long time, because it's like Three Musketeers, Robin Hood, like they're these stories that they just keep telling over and over and over again. That I'm just kind of tired of it.
I'm tired of it because they're not doing it well. I really thought the Ridley Scott Robin Hood was going to be fantastic, like the way the end of it was, because it set up the classic Robin Hood, and I would have liked to seen his tone in with all the other familiar stuff that I knew, but I didn't get that. And then Three Musketeers has been disaster after disaster. I love the story; it's really cool, but there hasn't been a good one. And I don't know. And I think that what you're saying, that type of fatigue, is probably the same fatigue when they pass it to a director and a writer, and they're going, I don't know if I want to tackle that. It hasn't been done before. People aren't responding to it. Why do I want to do this when I could do this? That's not to say it can't happen in 10 years or, shoot, even 5 years, so we'll see.
Yeah, and besides just the movies, then there's been like BBC television shows of the same stories.
Right.
And we've just seen them over and over and over again. Let's take a break.
Yes, and you know who's done that well, though, is Sherlock.
Oh, yeah.
Sherlock with television and movies, they've done it, and they've done it right, regardless of what you thought of Shadows or whatnot, too, they made money, and they could also go branch out into television. People aren't getting tired of it because in the TV world, they're telling it, and they're telling it in different ways. So if you can find a way to do it, but I don't want to see, the Three Musketeers running around in Manhattan with Nikes on. I want to see them in how we know them. So tell a new telling, but I guess just do it well.
I think also people have to remember, I think the reason why they pick those particular properties is because they're old, they're well known, and they're free.
Right.
They're free.
That's the main.
You or me right now could be like, I want to write a Three Musketeers script and make a movie.
And no one can stop us.
And we can do it. No one can, take that away from us.
I got it.
All right, what's next?
Cole Rodden writes, with everyone doing shared universes now, what should others take/stay away from what Marvel has done?
Stay away from.
I don't know. I mean, most of it they're trying to copy, and everyone's trying to copy Marvel right now.
Right. I mean, I guess what's the question as far as like if something that they've done wrong to not do? Better villains? I think. I mean, but that's
minor.
That's anything. But I think we're gonna get the best villain with Ultron. I really do. But I would just I don't know. It's more of just. Yeah, you know what you could take away from them too, and I think that they've even bettered themselves as well and what we were just talking about before is rushing, because they rushed to Iron Man 2, and that didn't really work. And they've rushed properties when they didn't have to, and I think that they've since corrected that problem. They're not rushing properties as much; they're planning them out. They know this whole cinematic universe where it's going. So if you're going to do, I mean, for me, that's why. People rushing to do shared universes, even when we were talking about when the Sony information came out about Men in Black and Jump Street, that's just kind of throwing it up in the air, and it's like that's what they don't do. And if you're going to do a shared universe, don't do that.
And Universal's trying to do their Monsters universe.
It's forced, man.
But speaking of the Iron Man 2 thing, I think one thing that they did correct and people can learn from is not to, and I'm kind of worried about Batman v Superman, to be honest, is not to shove so many things in there. Like
just to set you up.
Yeah, you want this character and this character and this character and this character, and then eventually the story of what the movie is just falls apart.
That's a great point, because Iron Man 2 absolutely did that. They were really trying to set you up for the Avengers. Ultimately, it worked. I mean, it did, but you did get to the expense of the story of Iron Man 2, of course. But yeah, I agree. Like, I think that's one of the things I'm most worried about with Batman v Superman is there's so many characters. Even if they have smaller roles, that's still 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and it's either a 3-hour movie or it's a 2-hour movie with 20 minutes of good story.
Well, hopefully they don't shoehorn them in, and that they're actually fit within the context of the story.
Yeah.
All right, what's next?
Brandon Martin writes, do you guys reckon we will see Ant-Man join the Avengers and possibly be in Cap 3?
I don't think he's going to be in the Avengers at all.
I think he will.
Not this one.
But not this one. I think he's going to come in Avengers 3.
Yeah, because I think they're going to set up. I think Ant-Man is going to be a surprise hit. I mean, not just in Marvel's like, oh, of course it's Marvel. No, I think it's going to be good, really good. And I think that it's going to wind up having a sequel, which is going off your one of the previous questions before. I think that Marvel has set it up just to going to see how much money it's going to make, just to see if the fans respond to it, and when it does perform, they're going to have it slated. And in between that time, I think you'll have Ant-Man 2, and then joining I think the final, the Infinity Gauntlet Part 2 is going to have everybody.
Better.
It's going to have it's going to have everybody, and it should. That's why I was on the show the other day, but when James Gunn's comments about not. You're not going to see too many Guardians and the Avengers. I think that is total BS, and I think it's total just throwing you the other way, because the stuff that we saw at that Marvel event, the way that they pitched it in that video was that everything was coming to a head with everyone. They just didn't show Ant-Man because we haven't really seen an Ant-Man movie yet, as where you just saw Guardians.
And also, they dealt with Infinity Gem, which is, and that Thanos was in the movie, so they definitely are going to go there. Maybe, like you said, the second Infinity War, and maybe not the first one.
I mean the second, and that's when you can, because eventually you're going to have a lot of these people, whether it be Ant-Man or the Inhumans or whoever it is, they're going to have to start to take over once we get into Phase 4. Because it's not going to be these current guys that we know now, whether because of their contracts or they're getting older or fatigue. We're going to eventually want to see, the Avengers won't end after Infinity Gauntlet. It'll just be a new team Avengers, and I think that that's what people will want. What's it, 2018, 2019? By that time, let's get a new team, and we'll be ready for it.
Well, also there's the rumor that at the end of this age, the Age of Ultron, that the lineup, there's going to be a shuffle there as well.
Well, it starts to start Civil War.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But all I have to say is they have to have the original Avengers in Infinity War.
Of course they have to. Yeah.
Even if they go away for a little while, let's say they split up and
Someone
Civil War
dies,
with
whatever.
Civil War,
Yeah.
they got to come back.
They absolutely have to come back, and it's a passing a torch. But there's going to be so much character development. And that's another answer to that question before: is what other franchises should do is further your characters, further your story. Don't just put them in movies because people like them. Something is going to happen big in this movie leading up to Civil War and then leading into those other movies. They are going to follow that thread. Cap and Tony Stark are going to go at it. So by the time we get to the Infinity Gauntlet is what happens between those two. Is Cap still around? You know, who knows? There's going to be a lot that's happening at that point.
To go back to that one question, too, you know what they could learn from Marvel? Is taking risks on talented directors that aren't as well known.
Yes.
Because, everyone's talking about Joss Whedon. He really had only made, one movie before that time?
Right,
Serenity?
he was huge in the geek culture.
Exactly,
but
with Buffy and Angel
Right.
and Firefly and all that stuff. But he actually wasn't a big name in the movies. But they took a chance on him. They took a chance on Jon Favreau.
Right.
They're Russo brother. They're taking chances on these talented.
Great point, because it's a matter of these studios who sometimes, like I always use the example of when Fox really bullied Gavin Hood when he did Wolverine. Because
Origins, yeah.
Yeah, people blame Gavin Hood, and it's the same way they were kind of blaming Mark Webb, as where the studio was like, boom, 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 you do what I say. It's pretty much what it was. Gavin Hood had done one small movie, which was Satsi, which is a great movie, and he wasn't able to do his thing. Like, he was handcuffed, and he had to be because he didn't have any power. But if you trust in a director and a writer off the bat, trust in them to do. You always have to take notes. A good studio executive will go and put stuff down, but yeah, you're right. Trust them. Let them put their vision. You hire them for a reason. The difference with Edgar Wright is that they just didn't see eye to eye as far as the overall plan, and they split amicably. So, but yeah, I agree. It's trust in who you hire and don't bully them.
All right, what's next?
Dylan Esposito writes, who wins this weekend, Kids box office, Night at the Museum or Annie?
I sure hope it's not at the museum.
The Hobbit.
Between the two, and I'll tell you, because I've seen, the reason I say that is because I've seen both of them, and I had high expectations actually for both the Night at the Museum and Annie, and I came out Night at the Museum is the better of the two, and it's a third, and it's one of Robin Williams' last. So I think because it's a franchise that has already proven themselves. And because reviews are starting to come out first of all too, and parents do check that sometimes too because parents are like, I gotta go see a movie, and probably neither one that I really want to see. Which one? Hey, let's go see that at the museum. When they look at, so I think that it'll probably by a hair, but Annie will do okay.
If we're not counting The Hobbit, I would say Annie.
Yeah,
I think
can't take a 5-year-old to see Hobbit.
No, but the box office. Right. But with Annie, it's just more well known. And
you
I
think Annie do?
Yeah,
Okay.
and Night at the
Interesting.
Museum, Secret of the Tomb.
You think it's more well known after a movie? It's third film that's proven pretty well.
No, I'm talking about Annie versus Night at the
Museum.
Museum.
That's what I mean. Night at the Museum is his third.
Yeah, but the second one didn't do as well as the first one did.
Yeah,
so it's kind of maybe I'm biased because I think the trailer is terrible.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I think Annie will squeak it out, but it's all going to be about The Hobbit, right?
Yes, The Hobbit will be the #1 movie for sure. Just a matter between those two. Who's number 2 is really the answer.
All right, what's next?
Speaking of Hobbit, Brad Kogan writes, if they make more Lord of the Rings films, will it be events before The Hobbit or events after Lord of the Rings?
After those Peter Jackson comments yesterday, I'm wondering if he could do both. I mean, because now, if you look at the Hobbit movie, the biggest thing people always said, the biggest problem was, how do they make 3 movies out of 1 book? And I happen to agree that it should have been 2 movies, but that being said, these movies were prequels to Lord of the Rings. They weren't really that much of an adaptation of the actual book. It was a prequel. So what if he did a fall? I'd like to see where it went. I don't know how that works legally. I don't know how that works. I'd like to see what happens as Aragorn as king. That to me would be really cool. I'd like to see what else happens, what a new threat is. But I don't know who you have to get the rights for to do that, to write a new story and write a new telling. But that's what I like to see. I like to see the events after Return of the King.
I wouldn't mind seeing a continuation of the story, but I think we need a break from it for a while.
Sure.
And I think Peter, I know he said he wanted to do more movies, but man, he invested a lot of time and basically a big chunk of his life to these movies. I mean, doesn't he want to like go do something else?
Well, he said that. He said he'd want to focus on a couple first and then maybe go back. But you know, the fact that he wants to go back is interesting because he wasn't even supposed to do this. So
it was supposed to be Guillermo del Toro.
And so after doing 6 movies, of course you have a deep attachment to it, and the world becomes your own. So I understand that, and it's just a matter of where it would go. I'm very curious to see what happens after Return of the King.
I'm actually opposite of you. I want to see what happens before, like the whole story of Aragorn's. What is his grandfather or something like that?
Yeah.
When the guy who first gets the ring and
Oh, right,
killed Sauron.
right.
Like that whole storyline,
Right.
I think would have been pretty cool.
Yeah, it would definitely end dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, what's next?
Jason Owns Prezuth writes, do you think it will take just one insanely good remake to get people to stop complaining about them?
No, because there are certain movies that people just hold in such high regard that you could make the best remake ever of a particular movie, and people are going nuts about it. That was the best remake ever, and then a month later they say, hey, we're going to remake Rocky. People lose their minds. So it's just a matter of that particular director. Here, look. Here's an example. This is not the best remake ever, but this is a movie that when it was announced was going to be remade, people were like, why in God's name would you remake that movie? And that's Footloose. Craig Brewer, who did Hustle and Flow, did the movie. Is it the best movie in the world? No, but it was respectful. It was a good remake as far as remakes go. Not completely necessary, but still there are definitely people who have done remakes that have worked.
The Thing. I love The Thing. That's a remake.
I look at The Departed. I mean, The Departed is a remake too. You know, so it's of Infernal Affairs. So there's always remakes that people will respect, but then you're going to start, people just keep saying, well, I want to remake that, and fans of the original stuff. There's a 14-year-old kid out there right now that loves a particular movie that just came out last year, right? In 10 years from now, if they remake it, that 14-year-old kid's going to be pissed off. And then a 14-year-old kid 10 years from now is not going to care. So it's different. It just depends on how it's made, what the story is, and what properties are tackled.
Yeah, and one really great remake is not gonna quiet down any noise because it really is a case-by-case basis.
Absolutely.
So, all right, what's next?
Freddie Orozco writes, John said he's a sucker for heist movies. I'm a sucker for time travel movies. Any other subgenres you guys love?
Sci-fi fantasy. Like fantasy movies and sci-fi, I always kind of cross my fingers hoping that it's the next great one, like fantasy movies and and the epics will get me too.
Sci-fi time travel.
Yeah.
I mean, we just had X-Men Days of Future Past.
Yeah.
We're having Terminator this year, which I always enjoy. Yeah, I'm a sucker for a lot of those time travel ones, especially they do it right. I mean, we had Looper.
Yeah.
Even Time Cop I kind of enjoyed.
Of course, don't apologize for that. Time Cop's great. Yeah, great mullet.
Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yeah.
All right, what's next?
Adam Rodriguez writes, how do you guys think Idris Elba would do as the Black Panther had someone else taken his role in Thor?
He's a little too old. Well, that's not true because Chadwick Boseman's is like 37 or something too. Anything Idris Elba does, he's great in. I think he would have been fine, but I like that they're getting, because Idris Elba is more you get more and more familiar with him as star-wise. I like that they went with Chadwick Boseman, who's got incredible talent. I still want to see, once Daniel Craig is gone, I'd like to see Idris Elba play Bond. I think that would be very interesting, and I think he's smooth, and it'd be a new take on the character.
I'd like him as Bond as well. But as far as Black Panther, I like Chadwick Boseman. I think he did a great job on 42 and Get On Up. I think Idris is. I've said this before, I think they wasted him as Heimdall in Thor. He's such a minor character. I know he did more in the second movie, but they wasted him because Idris Elba is a leading man.
Yeah.
He's not just a little side character.
I don't think they realized it when they hired him.
Yeah, I know. So I feel like they wasted him, and they could have saved him for Black Panther or another movie.
That happens though sometimes. Look at Non-Stop. Okay, they hired Lupita Nyong'o. She's a stewardess. She a flight attendant, sorry. And she for like a second is in the movie. And they don't know. Sometimes they just don't know. And then they, like you said, in Thor 2, they gave him more to do. Because like, oh man, we have Idris Elba. Let him jump on a ship and bring it down. But now it's, I'd like to see him do something else. And I actually would really hope that he was going to be Green Lantern. I thought that would have been cool. We'll see.
All right, what's next?
DJ writes, just wanted to ask, what Star Wars spin-off movies would you like to see other than Bounty Hunters?
Allow me to retort. There are tons. My number one pick is to go off the Knights of the Old Republic franchise, because there are, yes, and I know you guys talked about, they talked about Star Wars canon and expanded universe yesterday. We don't necessarily know what the plans are for the Old Republic, because there's supposedly a video game about Darth Revan that's coming out towards the end of next year that would, if they do indeed release that, all the games are canon, that would indeed put the Knights of the Old Republic back into canon, which would be incredible. I'd love to see the start of that, and if we get the Sith mythology in Episode 7, I think it sets it up and more curiosity to see that stuff, whether it be Darth Revan, Darth Bane, so that would be really cool. I am actually really interested to see the events of Obi-Wan Kenobi between Episode 4 and Episode 3 and Episode 4, that in between time, just to him watching over Luke on Tatooine, doing a couple side missions. There were rumors that was going to happen, that there was going to be like a kind of a separate, almost like Bond-type trilogy where the events don't necessarily move together, but they're 3 separate Obi-Wan adventures. That could be really cool. And then I think that we're going to get a young Han Solo movie, and I've been predicting, I think Han Solo, I don't know, it's a guess, I think Han Solo is going to die in Episode 7. I think he's toast. And I think that probably after Episode 8, the year after, you're going to get a Solo spin-off movie.
Well, you stole my answer, because Knights of the Old Republic is my favorite Star Wars storyline outside of the original trilogy. And when they announced that it wasn't canon, I was like, oh,
But
really?
they didn't announce that. They never announced that.
Well, they announced what was canon, and it was only going to be Clone Wars and the future, Rebels now.
Correct, but also from video games that went up, because there's a novel that I talk about until I'm blue in the face, and that's Darth Plagueis, okay? Tarkin book, which is now canon, they mention elements of the Darth Plagueis book, so that essentially makes parts of that book canon. The same can be said for video games. That's why I mentioned this Darth Revan video game. If they bring that into play at the end of the year next year, like they say they're going to, that game is canon. That will reset the whole Knights of the Old Republic storyline as canon.
Well, hopefully, because I found the foundation that they laid in that video game very, very fascinating. All the paths of the Sith and the paths of the Jedi, and like how, all that stuff that you actually don't get to see in the movies.
That's why I think Episode 7, from what we're seeing, that we now know his name is Kylo Ren, I think you're going to get into so much more of the history of the Sith, what they've never explored in the movies yet. I think you're going to explore a lot more of that, and I think the Rule of Two is going to go out the window. I think you're going to see a Sith army. There's going to be a lot of interesting things that happen that will get people's curiosity going about, well, what's the history of that? And if they set up the history in Episode 7, then that sets up, it's like the ancient Roman times for Star Wars.
Yeah, the Sith backstory is the most fascinating thing in Knights of the Old Republic. Yeah. Like visiting the planet and checking out all that
stuff.
This
is now going uber geeky here, but there's a scene again in this Tarkin novel to where they talk about the Jedi Temple. Underneath that, years beforehand, there was a Sith temple. Like that's where they built it on top of. That is now canon. So being able to say that Sith temple was there, that they used to, a bunch of them used to, they're setting it up through all these different comic books and video games. So I think we're going to get one eventually.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. All right, let's take 2 more.
All right, JC Movies writes, if you could nominate any movie for Best Picture that likely won't be recognized by the Academy, what would it be?
That's tough.
That would never, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and The Raid 2. Those are the two that, for me, that if you could, they'll never get recognized as far as best movie or The Raid 2, just for what it did that movie would never get nominated for anything. It should. And same thing with Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
Mine would be Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and X-Men Days of Future Past.
Yeah.
I think those two are the ones.
Captain America 2, also.
Yeah, that one. That would be probably 3rd on my list. All right, last one.
Christian Gilligan writes, do you think there's a chance Disney could continue and develop Star Wars to 10, 11, and 12?
I'm pretty sure it's guaranteed that they're going to be making a 10, 11. They didn't buy the Star Wars franchise from George Lucas for, what was like $4 billion?
4.5 billion.
So that they could make 3 movies and maybe a few spin-offs. This thing is gonna go and go.
Why wouldn't it?
And go.
Yeah.
I mean, they just saw like untapped potential sitting there because Lucas had control over it and he could do whatever the hell he wanted with it.
Right.
They're like, that's a gold mine. Let's spend a ton of money to get that so we can get our costs back.
And there's a reason you hire 23, 24-year-old actors to do this as well, too, because we're going to get the last bits of the classic characters that we know. But when you get to episodes 10, 11, and 12, those new characters will also now become classic characters, and they will have new characters to bring along to them. The religion of the Jedi and the Sith and all this stuff and the politics lends itself to go on for a very long time. But not unlike what we were just talking about before, setting up the right teams in place. Don't just start doing it to make money. Keep your universe, know what your fans want, and just keep on the path. Stay on target.
I think the big question, though, are they going to take a break? Is it going to be a trilogy? Is 7, 8, 9 going to be a trilogy? They take a break, and then they do 10, 11, 12, or are they going to run it? Because right now, the way that the Star Wars movies are coming out, it's like, here's one, and then they're going to do like another
Spin-off.
1, 2 years later.
From right now, the way it's going, it's going 7, spin-off 8, spin-off 9.
Exactly.
Right.
So are they going to slow that down so they take a break, or are they just going to keep going? Because, remember, Marvel just keeps going.
Right.
So Star Wars could conceivably do that as well if they wanted to.
But but who's to say that that's not where our previous conversation come in? Let's say, okay, now it's time to really go back into the history. Let's make an Old Republic trilogy. They could do that. They could do an Old Republic trilogy at the end, let me say in 2020 or whenever they do it. And then after that, okay, we've set that up. People are responding to that. Let's now go back into episodes 10, 11, 12.
All right, well, if they make a Knights of the Old Republic trilogy, I'm going to be even more excited than episode 7.
Yeah.
Because I love that story so much. All right, guys, so that's it for today. I'd like to thank, I guess, the one guy at the table with me. Christian, where can people find you?
Drinking my water bottle, talking about Knights of the Old Republic. On Twitter, make sure you go there at Christian Harloff as well as Instagram. And I'm usually posting stuff of canon for Star Wars. And just in general, you guys have been so awesome. Movie questions. Tweet me out some stuff today. Let me know what you thought of the episode.
And thanks for Ashley for hosting today and handling all the Twitter questions.
Twitter, Instagram, at Ashley Mova. Happy Thursday, guys. And
you can find me on Twitter at ThinkHero or on Instagram, Dennis.tzng. And make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/AMC Theaters. And I will see you guys tomorrow.
Hey everyone, if you like this video, click that thumbs up button and make sure to subscribe to our AMC Movie News YouTube channel. It's free and helps you stay up to date with all the latest movie news, as well as our daily AMC movie talk show. Also, make sure that you follow us on Facebook and Twitter to stay up to date with all of our special promotions, contests, and prize giveaways.